How's it going, everybody? So today what we're going to be talking about is how to make a common roof rafter. So let's get down to it. Let's pretend the building, shed, doghouse, whatever you're planning on making is it's a square building just like this. And let's say that you have the span of your building at 8 feet. Okay, the span is from one side all the way to the other, from corner to corner of your top plates. That's the span. The run of your building is half of that. Half of that is 4 feet. This is what we're going to be concentrating on in order to make your roof rafters. So, in order to figure this out, you have a couple options on how you want to make the pitch of your roof. The pitch of your roof could be 312, could be 412, could be 612. It doesn't matter what pitch you're using. What matters the most is what you want your gable roof to look like. So, the lower the number, the lower the pitch of the roof. The higher the number, the higher the pitch of the roof. So whatever you decide on using, it doesn't matter, it's just your preference. What do these numbers mean? 312, 412, 612. What these numbers mean is for every 12 inches, the rise, which is going to be right here on top of your roof, the rise is going to rise up 3 inches if we're using a 312 pitch. If we're using a 412 pitch, the rise for every 12 inches is going to go up 4 inches. It's pretty simple. For the 612, whoops, I don't know why I erased that. For the 612, for every 12 inches, the rise is going to go up 6 inches. It's pretty simple to figure that out. So, 4 feet, we have 48, so I can write on this thing, 48 inches. 48 inches is 4 feet. You don't have to really worry about this number so much when you're looking. Let's say we're going to do a 412 pitch roof. 412. We're going to concentrate on a 412 right now. So let's erase all these other ones. Okay. 4 times 4 is 16. 16 inches. That's going to be the rise of the middle of your roof. Right where the ridge board is going to be at. The top of that ridge board is going to be at 16 inches. Pretty simple to figure out. We're not concentrating so much on the 48 inches. We know that there's 4 feet. We can convert this. Every foot goes up 4 inches. So 12 inches is 1 foot. So for every foot, so almost think about it this way. Okay? For every foot, it's going to rise up 4 inches. 4 feet, 4 times 4 equals 16. Convert that into inches. 16 inches. Pretty simple. Okay, so let's try to convert this over to a 612 pitch so you guys understand the difference here. I'm going to take all this off. Let's do a 612 pitch. 6 times 4, we're looking at 24 inches. 24 inches is going to be the rise of this portion. So basically at the peak of your roof, when you start making your gable roof and you're going to have your plywood and all that, the very peak of the roof is going to be 24 inches. It's pretty simple to figure out. You can see that the higher the number that we're using for the pitch is going to be the higher the pitch. So if you're using a 312, let's say 312. Still 4 feet. 3 times 12 is 12 inches. 3 times 4 is 12 inches. So 12 inches of a rise. The top of the peak of the roof is going to be 12 inches. That's pretty simple to figure out, and that's how you figure that part out. Okay, so now you're probably asking, how do I put these numbers and make an actual rafter? So we have our rafter square here. A couple different ways we can do this. I'm going to show you how to do each one. You have your speed square. And then we have a way to make a calculation. The calculation we want to find, if we know what our run is, it's 4 feet or 48 inches. And we know what our rise is, which is 16 inches. Let's take this out of the equation for right now, the 4 feet, and concentrate on the 48 inches. Okay? The calculation that we're going to be using is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. C squared is this point from the top of the peak to the corner, ending corner of your top plate. We don't know what c squared is until we do this calculation. So, what's A, what's B? A and B. We want to find C. So, 16 squared plus 48 squared is going to give us C squared. The way to do this is pretty simple. Just get your calculator. If you have a smartphone, you're going to be able to figure this out on a calculator. 16 times 16 equals 256. Okay, try to get this thing off here. Two, 5, 6 plus 48 times 48 is 2,304. Add these numbers together, plus 2, 5, 6. It's going to give you a total of 2,560. 2,560. Now you need to find the square root of 2,560. And all you have to do, if you have a smartphone, is flip this sideways, and all of a sudden your square root comes up on your cell phone. So, square root of 2,560 equals 50.59. So what that means is from this corner to the very top plate, the ending of your top plate to the outside of your roof is 50.59 inches. Now this right here seems like a lot of mess to figure out a rafter. And I'm going to show you guys the easiest way to figure all this out without even doing any of this. Now, the only time that you ever really want to use this number is when you're prior to purchasing material. You have your plywood at 4 by 8. 4 feet by 8 feet plywood. You know that 4 feet already by our calculations is 48 inches. If you're laying your plywood, say this is the top of your roof, here's your ridge board, and you're laying your plywood sideways, going this way, 48 inches is going to be cut off somewhere about right here with an extra 2.59 inches left. Now, that's not to include your fascia or the rafter tail that's on the end of your rafter. So keep in mind that the only time I ever really use this number here is to figure out how much material I'm going to need to purchase before I go to the store. One thing that you have to remember is the difference between a ridge board and a ridge beam. Here again is your shed, your house. Let's look at this as being the front. Here's a little door, little window, and we are going to go ahead and figure out, obviously, this is your ridge board, okay? How to find the height of this, so we already figured out, is 16 inches on a 4/12 pitch, okay? Now, if you were to use a 3/12 pitch, you could still use a ridge board. Anything below a 3/12 pitch, say a 2/12 pitch, you're going to need to use a ridge beam, which basically means that these rafters are going to meet at the top and there's going to be a board underneath it. That's by code right there. Is you have to do anything below a 3/12 pitch. This is now your ridge board, which at one time was meeting in the middle of your rafters. This is your ridge board. A ridge beam goes underneath it, which is when your rafters meet at the top, but you have a board on the bottom. A beam, basically. Ridge board, ridge beam. Anything below a 3/12 pitch needs a ridge beam. Anything higher, it's going to be a ridge board. The way I remember that is easy. O is for over, which basically means anything over the 3/12, or you can remember it this way: beam. Flip that E around to a 3. Anything below a 3/12 pitch is going to need the ridge beam. So let's clean this board up a little bit and let's figure this out one more time just for a refreshment. Make this a little bit bigger now. We have an 8-foot span, one side to the other. That means half of our building or our run is 4 feet from right here to right here, or the ending of the top plate. We're working on tops, okay? If I want to do, I don't know, a 3/12 pitch, let's say 3 times 4, 12 inches. The top of your peak is going to be 12 inches. Let's go a 4/12. 4 times 4 is 16. 16 inches. Top of the peak is going to be 16 inches. Let's do a 6/12. 6 times 4 is 24. 24 inches. Top of the peak is going to be 24 inches. The higher number you go on this side, the higher the pitch is going to be. For every foot, every 12 inches, it raises up 6 inches. For every 12 inches on a 4/12, it's going to raise up 4 inches. That's the way that you calculate that to find the height of your pitch. Now, how do we find out exactly how to make our pitch? How to make the ridge board? So, again, coming back with our house, our structure, whatever you're building here, okay? And we know that, let's say on a 4/12 pitch, we want to be at 16 inch rise, okay? "16-inch rise." So, how do I find out how to build this? Say we're using a 2 by 8 by 8 or 10, whatever you're using, it doesn't matter. 2 by 8 by, let's say, by 10. Okay? The 8 in the middle is the number you need to be concentrating on. That is from this point to this point, bottom point. 8. You're going to subtract from the 16-inch rise, subtract your 8, and that's going to bring you to 8 inches. Okay? So, you know that you're going to need to make some sort of support with a 2x4 of 8 inches. So, on top of your roof, you should have your ridge board at 8 inches. Let's make this so it looks a little bit proportioned. 8 inches. You're going to have a support of 8 inches. And then you're going to have 2 brackets on the side, a little less than 16 inches. So let's go about 15 inches. That way you know that your plywood is going to be able to clear that. If you go straight up with this, with your support on both sides of your 2x4s, you're not going to be able to clear this. It's going to be, it's not going to work. So you need to make sure that you go below in order for this to clear it. That's basically how you make your structure. Just take your rise, 16 inches, minus the thickness of your wood from one side to the other, subtract 8 inches, and that's going to give you 8 inches of a support that you need to put on the bottom of that ridge board. Same exact thing as if you were doing a 2x6 by 10. You know that this right here is 6 inches. 16-inch rise minus 6 inches is going to leave you with 10 inches. This board has to be a 10-inch support. Okay, so now how are we going to do this? So, what we have here is our rafter square. Okay, what I have on here are some stair gauges. You don't need these, but they help out tremendously when trying to figure out exactly where you're going to be placing your rafter. What I like to do is call the step down. So, if you can see here, I have this portion of my blade on my rafter marked at 12. And this portion of the tongue, this is the tongue, this is the blade. The tongue is marked at 4. I have my stair gauges, so when I put it on, it simply just places right onto that instead of having to wiggle it around and make sure I'm on 4, make sure I'm on 12. Doesn't matter where I'm moving this at, wherever I put it, it's going to land right on it. So, you're going to start from one side. Okay, so you can see here, I have the 4 marked on the very top where the stair gauge is at, and I have the 12 at the top of this portion where the stair gauge is at. When you have those two set up on a 4/12 pitch, again, it doesn't matter if you're using a 4/12, 6/12. If you were using a 6/12, all you would do is make this 4 at a 6. If you're using a 3/12, you would change that 4 to the 3. But you always remain on the blade side on a 12. So, we have our 4/12 set up. All we're going to do is make our angle cut. There's our marking for our 4/12. Okay? Going back to this, when you have this portion set up, just try not to move on me, we're going to know that our 12 mark is right here. We're going to move this back again. Okay, so I apologize. The tarp that was holding this door closed with shade actually was moving all over me, so I had to move it out of the way. So let's start this again. 4/12, we have our 4/12 pitch here. All we're going to do is make our mark. Make our marking on 12. Move that down. Back to their 4/12 pitch. 2. Mark 12. Let me get onto the other side here so I don't get in front of the camera. Move that down to that marking again. Set on 412. There's your line again. Mark your 12. Here it is again. Now you got to count how many you've gone so far. We know that our 4 foot is the run of our building. So 1, 2, 3, and then we're coming on to a 4th one here. Okay? Mark your 12. Move this down. Okay? This right here is where our bird's mouth's going to go. Okay, to figure out your bird's mouth now is that this is the last portion of our run here. This is your 4 feet. So remember, 1, 2, 3, 4. Our run of our building is 4 feet. So we want to make sure that we're going to the 4th one to make our bird's mouth. So what you do is usually just go about 1.5 inches up. You can keep 1.5 inches, or you can keep about 1/3 of the way up. This is our marking for 1.5 inches. Get your square, line it up to a 90 from that mark. And right here is the cutout you're going to make for your bird's mouth. Now, this is not where you're not going to cut all of this. You're only cutting this portion out, right where the X is at. That's all you're going to be cutting out for this to sit down on a piece of wood on your top plate. It's going to sit down just like this. Okay? This should be an exact 90-degree angle from the top of your plate on this line right here. There's your bird's mouth. Don't forget that you need also a rafter tail. So let's go ahead and put a rafter tail on this. It all depends on how far you want to go with this. We can go another, see if I can get this thing set up here. Go another foot if you want. It doesn't really matter. All you're going to make sure that you're doing is marking the 12, moving this down, and there's the end of your rafter tail. You could do it that way, or you can make your own preferred rafter tail at a certain distance apart. So let's say I want to go a 6-inch rafter tail. You're going to leave it right here. You're going to mark 6 inches. Okay? All you have to do is get your square again. And there's your 6-inch rafter tail. It doesn't matter how big you're making this, just make sure that you are making an actual rafter tail and you're not cutting this portion. All you're cutting, you're gonna have 3 cuts all together. This cut, so all the way down here, these 2 lines here, and then your far ending. Let's move this over this way. Where this cut meets the ridge board. Okay, so there's a couple things also that we need to touch base on so that you understand that when you make these cuts, what else you need to do before you even make this cut. So we're looking at 4 feet span, a 4-foot span. 1, 2, 3, 4, bird's mouth, rafter tail. Okay? For every 12-inch, remember, keep that in mind, every 12-inch is going to be your foot. So if you're going a 5-foot building, you're going to make 5 marks. If you're going a 6-foot building, 6-foot run, you're going to make 6 marks. It all just depends on how far your run is. Remember, the span is the length from one side of your top plate all the way to the other top plate, and the run is right in the middle. So, typically, the boards you're going to be using is 1.5 inches. Okay, so you have to remember that your board here, let's pretend that this is your ridge board. Now, this is a 2x4, okay? But I don't care right now about the length of this. What I care about is the thickness of the board that you're putting in. We're looking at an 1.5 inch board here. In order for you to make this fit perfectly, to make this hit the edge of your ridge board, okay, so it'd be like this. And for this bird's mouth right here to meet the end of that top plate, you have to take this into consideration. Okay, so we have an 1.5 inch ridge board. What you need to do is take half of that. Half of that is 3/4 of an inch. Because we are no longer, if this makes any sense, we are no longer working on a full 4-foot run when you have something in the middle. I don't care if you put 2 2x4s or 2 2x8s, whatever you decide to put in there, or 3. I don't care what you decide to put in there. What matters is now you're no longer working with a complete 4-foot run. You have to meet the half point and take that off of this first cut. So if we're just using one piece of wood for your ridge board, half of that marking is 3/4 of an inch. So what you need to do is get this marking here, move it at 3/4 of an inch. You're going to eliminate this. You need to take the ridge board into consideration here. Move this up. Move this up to that 3/4 of an inch. And now you have your new marking here. This is the marking you're going to be using to make your cut. It is no longer this marking, but we needed this marking to begin all our runs here, all our cuts on this. After you make all your markings on this side is when you finally come back to this ending and make the difference. This now is going to match up perfectly. And that's what's going to allow the bird's mouth to meet up with the end of that top plate. So, again, if we were using 2 boards for your ridge board, if we're using 2 beams, long beams across, long ridge boards, and we have a thickness on each one of 1.5 inches, if we had 2 placed together, okay, let me go get a piece of board so you can see what I'm looking at. Okay, I got another piece of wood here, a piece of block. So, if for whatever reason you like the design of having, two boards in the middle for your ridge board, and you want to be able to tie these in somehow and put a cap on the end when it reaches the outside of your gable roof, whatever the case is, it doesn't matter. If you're using 2 boards, half of that is 1.5 inches. So you need to take that in consideration from your 4-foot run now, is that we're losing a total. We're no longer working on a 4-foot run. We're now working on a 4-foot, 1.5 inches, okay, run. So you need to take 1.5 inches off of this instead. Instead of the 3/4, you're going to take 1.5 inches off your first marking you made. Inch and a half. Put this back. And this is going to be your new cut. Everything else is still going to remain the same. It doesn't matter. This is the last portion you have to deal with, is knowing how thick your ridge board is. Okay, so the same thing falls with the speed square. Now, I don't use the speed square for this. However, if this is all you have, this is what you need to use. So what we have here on this side is a pivot point. Okay, we have our pivot mark right here, so we know on this side we still have the same pivot. These markings here are your common rafter. It even says common on here. I'm not sure if it says it for all the speed squares, but it does say it for this one. You have your common rafter markings here. So if I were, notice this is my 412 pitch run right here. This is my marking on for 412 pitch. If I were just out of the blue, had no idea what it would look like on the rafter square, I would be moving this on a pivot point. You put this on the very top of your rafter, and you move this 4 to the top of your rafter. All you do is angle it, hold this pivot point, angle it, and you can see here the same exact marking for my 4/12 pitch. Same thing if you were making a 6/12 pitch. If I was making a 6/12 pitch, I would leave it right here, leave the pivot point, move this portion up to the 6, and that would be my new angle. If I was making a 3/12 pitch, hold it right here, move it up to your 3, right on your common rafter line. That would be your marking. What would help in this situation is that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay? You would make your marking, let's say if it was at the top right here, and we would make our 4/12 pitch run. You would make your marking here. From this point, and if I remember correctly, on a 4/12 pitch, it was 50.59 inches. You would have your marking here. You would put your tape measure down the line to 50.59, make your marking again, and you would have your bird's mouth. Pretty simple. Okay, so let's put this into a little perspective here and see if this works. We're moving from our 4/12, okay? 4/12 pitch. Move this up, here's our angle. There's our first angle. If I were to move this over to 50.59, which is right about a 7/8, 50.59. Take this off, get your speed square again, put it at the pivot point, move it up to 4/12, make your marking. Well, now it's time to figure out our bird's mouth, right? Go 1.5 inches up, angle this off, make a 90-degree angle. There's our bird's mouth. That's without using the rafter square. It could be done however you want. The calculations are obviously more. It takes a little bit longer. Okay, so thanks for watching the video. I really hope this helped out. Just keep in mind, doesn't matter what pitch you're using. You can use whatever pitch you want to use. Make your roof whatever you want to make it look like. If you want a small pitch to make it just the water run off the gable roof, you know, if you want a large pitch, a high pitch, it doesn't matter. Just remember, the higher the number, the higher the pitch. 3/12 is going to be a very low pitch. A 6/12 is going to be higher. Okay? You can use your speed square. Remember, if you're using your speed square, all you have to remember is to get your a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That's from one point of the top of your ridge board to right to the edge of the top of the top plate, the end of your top plate. Just have to remember that. Very easy that way. Can't go wrong with that. You know, it'll be very accurate. Just make sure that once you do all that, you're still taking into consideration the ridge board, the thickness of that ridge board for your first cut. That way you make sure that everything's going to fall into place. Rafter square, awesome tool to have. If you don't have one, they're not that expensive. I don't even believe one of these can go over $20. You know, I think I bought this one for $11 at Lowe's. It has all your markings on here. You have different types of rafter squares. This one specifically has all these different markings to make different angles. There's other videos on how to actually figure these markings out. And just learn about your rafter square if you want. I mean, this thing can probably do your taxes for you. But many different ways to figure this out. It's not hard. Follow the steps. Remember, whatever you're dealing with is if you have an 8-foot span, I don't even care what span you have. Let's even say a 10-foot span. 10-foot span. Always remember, You're concentrating on your run. Half of that is 5 feet. For each step that you're going to be taking on your rafter is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to get to your bird's mouth. Don't forget your rafter tail. Whatever length you decide you want it on. If you want a large rafter tail, you're gonna make yourself a large rafter tail. If you want a 6-inch overhang for a rafter tail, that's what you're gonna make. You know, it doesn't matter what you decide. Always keep this in mind. Little refresher. Finding your pitch. 412. 4 times 5 is 20. 20 inches. Top of the peaks, gonna be 20 inches. It's not hard to figure this out. It's very easy. Doesn't require a lot. You don't even need this. You can have it if you want. Like I said, the only time I ever use that a squared plus b squared equals c squared in order to find this out right here is to figure out how much material I need to buy. If I know that I'm gonna have more than just a piece of plywood for my for the top in order for it to meet all the way to the end, I know that that calculation is going to help me out to figure out if I need more wood or not. I think I pretty much touched base on everything that I possibly can in here. If you guys have any questions or comments or anything, please leave them below. I'll try my best to answer those for you. Just keep in mind, you can do a rafter square. I mean, rafters with whatever square you want to use. Speed square, rafter square, doesn't matter. But you need one of these. Keep that in mind. You need one of them. Thanks for watching.